Okay, folks, welcome to the program. This is the Otherppl Show, a weekly podcast featuring in-depth conversations with today's leading writers. It is a books and culture show. I'm Brad Listi, and I'm in Los Angeles. It's great to be with you. I appreciate you tuning in. I have a great episode for you today. My guest is Angela Flournoy. Her new novel is called The Wilderness, and it is available from Mariner Books. The Wilderness has been longlisted for the National Book Award. It has also been named a finalist for the Kirkus Prize. It is Angela's second novel, and it is about female friendship and what it means to move through adulthood and into middle age, a period of life that she refers to as the wilderness. So it's about how disorienting and uncertain it can be trying to navigate this part of life, one's professional life, one's relationships, motherhood, all of it. This is a very contemporary novel. It tracks a group of female friends across many years. It takes place in the 21st century, starting in the late aughts and proceeding into the 2020s. So it is set against the backdrop of all that we have been living through this century, from political upheaval to economic and environmental instabilities, internet culture, the social media of it all, and all of the attendant volatility that accompanies these things. I am very happy to have Angela Flournoy on this program for the first time. You'll be hearing us in conversation in just a couple of minutes. Today's episode is brought to you by Echo Books, publisher of A Different Kind of Tension, New and Selected Stories by Jonathan Lethem. A Different Kind of Tension is the official October pick of the Otherppl Book Club. That is my book club. You can sign up over at otherppl.com, get a new book delivered to your door every 30 days. I interview book club authors right here on the program. A Different Kind of Tension is a definitive collection of new and selected stories by a master of the form. Jonathan Lethem fluidly moves between realism and the surreal, the absurd and the mundane. A Different Kind of Tension is a collection that encompasses life and death, couples in trouble. It involves talking animals, if that's your thing, and the implications of technology, especially when technology has run amok. Once again, the book is called A Different Kind of Tension, New and Selected Stories by Jonathan Lethem, available from Echo. Today's episode is also brought to you by Hurley Winkler. What if you had a writer, fairy godmother, who you could call anytime you're stuck, someone who actually gets the writing life and all of the other stuff that comes with it, like growing your newsletter audience, or submitting your work, or just finishing that very stubborn draft? That's what you get with Hurley Winkler's one-on-one calls for writers. Hurley has a real knack for helping writers turn those burnout-inducing slogs into sustainable routines that you will actually look forward to. She's like the friend who won't let you quit on yourself. Talking with her is a shot in the arm that will keep your writing moving. Otherppl listeners can get their first call with Hurley for just $60 over at workwithhurley.com. That's workwithhurley.com for $20 off your first call with a writer who knows her stuff. Once again, that's workwithhurley.com. So a quick plug for my email newsletter before we begin. You can sign up for it over at bradlisti.substack.com. It's very straightforward. I will email you once a week. I'll let you know about the latest episodes of this show. I also share a list of links to things that I've been reading and finding interesting. So if that sounds good, check it out over at bradlisti.substack.com and subscribe. I also want to give a quick plug to Deep Dive, my new company. It is an educational platform that creates in-depth courses for people who are serious about learning. The debut course, the flagship course from Deep Dive, is called How to Write a Novel. I am the host of the course, and it features more than 50 hours of never-before-heard conversations with nearly 24 of today's most celebrated contemporary writers, including Emily St. John Mandel, Vivi Ganeshananthan, Stephen Graham Jones, Melissa Broder, Steve Almond. The list goes on. There is also a new course from Deep Dive. It's an 8-hour course, an intensive called How to Write Autobiographical Fiction, and it is taught by Hannah Pittard, the acclaimed author of many novels, most recently a novel called If You Love It, Let It Kill You. How to Write Autobiographical Fiction also features Michael Wheaton, founder of Autofocus Books, an independent press that specializes in the publication of autobiographical literature. So you can check out all of it at www.deepdive.audio. Okay, so my guest once again is Angela Flournoy. Her new novel is called The Wilderness, and it is available from Mariner Books. Angela's debut novel, The Turner House, was a finalist for the National Book Award. It won the VCU Cabell First Novel Prize and was also a finalist for the Center for Fiction's First Novel Prize and an NAACP Image Award. Angela's nonfiction has appeared in many publications, including the New York Times, The Nation, the LA Times, and the New Yorker magazine. She is a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop and a faculty member in the low residency MFA program at Warren Wilson College. And I'm very happy to welcome her onto the Otherppl Show for the first time and to be able to share our conversation with all of you right now. So let's get to it. Here I am with Angela Flournoy, and her new novel, one more time, is called The Wilderness.
So I began thinking about this book in 2016, in the fall of 2016, and I had a fellowship at the New York Public Library at the Coleman Center at the time to research for this book. And even though it's present, it projects into the future. I did a lot of research about the past, especially in New York and LA, to think about how the trends that I saw developing in those cities and where they might be headed. But in the fall of 2016, there was, a big political shift that people had not necessarily predicted. And for a time, it felt like trying to be even remotely speculative about where this country was going was not something that was going to be easy or necessarily fun. So I had other things that I was working on. I had sold the show to HBO. So I just kind of worked on developing that. And then for a time, I was a contributing writer to the New York Times Magazine. So I worked on those things, but I never stopped thinking about this. So I think that probably in 2019, I got a fellowship at the American Academy in Berlin is when I started really working on the book again. I think at that point, we had been a couple of years into the first Trump administration, and I had a better sense of a way that I could approach the book that wasn't so beholden to the news, but was still interested in what it feels like to be alive right now. So I started working on that, started working on the book again seriously in 2019. And I turned in the final draft in the summer of 2024.
So the kernel of the idea, this to me feels like a novel that's about friendship and chosen family. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, what was the kernel of the idea back in 2016? Can you locate it?
Well, the idea is older than that. So I wrote the first chapter of this novel in a version of it in 2011 when I was still in grad school at Iowa. And it was a chapter that it felt like the beginning of something longer, but around the same time, I was also beginning to work on the Turner House.
And just to interrupt, I'm sorry, but the Turner House being your debut novel.
Yes. So in 2011, I knew that this story was not that. This chapter of this granddaughter taking a trip to Europe with her grandfather because he has this sort of elaborate end of life plan was something that something I thought about in 2011, but I didn't know what it was or where it went. So it's one of those things where, you get a lot of computers, you have various Dropbox files, you lose stuff sometimes, but I would always make sure that I had this chapter because I eventually thought I would do something with it. But I didn't really start to think about it seriously till 2016. But so the first, I guess, idea, it was actually 2011.
Yeah, that's a great opening chapter. And I've read about assisted suicide. Like occasionally there will be some sort of expose or article in the New Yorker or something about it. You know, you hear about this thing happening in Switzerland, where these places where it's legal, and it seems like such a hardcore thing to do, and to have to accompany someone on their journey to that would be, I have to believe, incredibly stressful. I guess if they're suffering terribly, maybe there's some degree of peace embedded in there, but that's an inherently dramatic situation, to say the least.
Yeah, and I was really interested from the beginning with what it's like to be doing that relatively young. So I think Desiree is like 22, and I don't think she has like a full grasp of what it means that she's the person and the only person. She has an older sister who's not invited, so that she's the person with this responsibility. Like this, she doesn't really fully understand it until later. And I wanted to think about how this being her, just her grandfather and her sister being really her only family, this one event kind of separates both of them from her, because her sister, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, can't really get over the fact that she wasn't invited or even told that it was happening. And so they are estranged for a lot of the novel. And to me, that was the way that it felt in my brain, like an inciting incident was, well, how does this person try to recreate family now? And that is really where the rest of the book comes from this idea of, there's a lot of like thematic issues that also I felt like the first chapter is very usefully kind of laying out things that come back around later in the book, but also just on a basic level, if you do not have family, but you have a desire for family, like, well, how do you go about trying to create it?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really ambitious novel. Like, as a writer, I was kind of marveling at the way that you were able to kind of hold all of these various story threads together and to unify them. So for people listening who have not had a chance to read, this novel tells the story of a friendship between primarily 4 women, but you also mentioned Danielle, Desiree's sister, who also has a bit of a storyline. But there's Desiree, there's Nakia, there's January, and there's Monique. And they grew up together or came of age together, and you're following them through their adult lives. And I guess this is as good a time as any to talk about the title of your book, which refers to this period of life. You call your novel The Wilderness, and I think what you're referring to is adulthood, right? Like middle age. How do you characterize it?
I think of the book as a coming into middle age novel, which I don't know if there's a fancy German word for that, but I'm sure there is. But unlike a Bildungsroman, it's not about leaving childhood. It's about leaving the sort of initial accomplishment of becoming an adult, like leaving your parents' house, etc., into everything that comes after that. So these women, we follow them from their 20s into their 40s, and it's about how do you chart or navigate a path where it's less clear. It's kind of, there are some options to how to go from being an adolescent into a young adult, whether that is you go to college or you just get a job, or, in this country, a lot of people, they join the military. But when it comes to how do you navigate careers that don't exist, they existed perhaps when you were 20, but do not exist by the time that you were 40, which is the case for many people right now. Or how do you navigate losing a parent or suddenly becoming a parent? How do you navigate just feeling like the markers for success that were clear perhaps for your parents' generation about what you're supposed to look like you have accomplished by your 40s are just not necessarily viable for you? Like perhaps you will never own a home, perhaps you will not have children. How do you still feel like you're grounded in your life? And so because it's less navigable, that is why I thought that the idea of a wilderness made sense.
Yeah, it made sense to me. I mean, I just turned 50 and I'm like, I think I'm still in the wilderness. Like, I don't know if I'm ever leaving. And it's a real credit to you too, because I was so invested in these people. And there's so many different lives that you are depicting in this book and rendering with such like vividness and humanity. I feel like I knew them. It's one of those really absorbing novels that is peopled by characters who, I don't know, just evoke a real sense of empathy and connection, and yet whose lives and life experiences might fall outside, at least to some degree outside of my own. Like, I was in it with these people. I was like, these are my girls for like a week of my life, So kudos to you, but also it's a big challenge to sort of you have a lot of planes in the air that you're trying to sort of keep up. And I credit you for pulling it off, because that's not an easy thing to do. I have to believe it was hard in the drafting to sort of make it all work.
Yes and no. I think that the things to make work for me were not really logistics as much as aesthetics. I had some aesthetic sort of challenges I set for myself about how the types of writing, like for instance, there's one character who we purposely do not actually get, like most of the first 2 parts of the book are close third POVs, but there's one character, Monique, who we do not get any close third POVs from on purpose. But how does she feel like she is part of this group? If everything we get from her is just her own things that she has published on the internet, blog posts, Instagram captions, Substacks, probably by the end of the book, how does she feel like a real member of this group, this friend group? And how do we see her change and grow just through her self sort of narrativization, which is not the same as like a first person narrator. So that was a hard sort of challenge I set for myself. And without spoiling, there's also, I'm assuming you care about spoilers.
I mean, to a degree, at least we flag it if people really want to have like a totally unspoiled reading experience. Maybe they pause and come back after they've read. But
well, yeah. So also my interest in, after there's like a big event that happens in the book, having the kind of aesthetic, like givens of the novel shift very quickly. So those things were harder for me than just the POVs and the time changes. I think that the Turner House, my debut novel, was I had a lot of good practice in I feel very comfortable with multi-POV novels. So the POVs, managing that and all the different times was not as difficult as feeling satisfied that I could make these different kind of stylistic shifts, like the reader can metabolize them.
What about time? Because this novel covers a lot of time as well. I mean, that can be tricky. Is that something that comes naturally to you as well, to kind of carry a group of characters through the decades?
I think that in this case, because part of what the novel is thinking about is how we, like kind of the miracle of how people remain in our lives when we are not the same people. Like we are not the same people that we were at 25, obviously, as we are by like 35. And the fact that people remain in your life, it felt like it made sense to me to be able to check in on them at different times. But it also, I wanted to complicate the feeling that the only thing that is changing these relationships is time passing, because it's also about moments for each character that it felt pivotal that they had another intersection with like another member of this group. So I've said a lot in a lot of interviews about how I wanted it to be like prismatic, but that's really the way that I wanted readers to approach this. Is if I was asking, say you, Brad, and maybe a friend that you've had for a couple decades, if I was asking both of you at the same time to tell the story of your friendship, it would not be a chronological answer, because one person would be interjecting and being like, well, before this thing, there was actually this moment where you did this for me, or I was going through this. And so what happens is this kind of like it's like an accretion of information and experience more than it is about we met when we were in high school and then this happened and then this happened.
Yeah, I just was reading something the other day and I'm totally forgetting what it was, but it had something to do with what you're talking about, how, we have friends and we interact with them. Maybe we go to college together, so we're seeing them a lot and it's this very intimate time and it's a lot of fun. And then we maybe go our separate ways after we graduate, but we stay in touch. And then maybe we end up in the same town again a few years later. We're not the same people. Every time we see somebody, we're different and they're different. And yet, like you said, it's this like accrual of experiences together, conversations you've had as all of these different iterations of yourselves. And I think in total, it amounts to like this very deep bond, or hopefully it does. And I was thinking about that. I guess I've been thinking about that a lot as you kind of go through middle age, like who sticks around and who doesn't. That's what your book made me think about. Who are the friends who you sort of carry with you through life? And like, who are your ride or dies? And also, who are some of the people who might fall off that you might not have expected to? And then I was thinking about the time period in which this book was composed. I was kind of reading the creative backstory, which we just talked about, 2016, and then we get into the pandemic. I read that you were writing this book with, I think, my guest just a few days ago, Jade Chang. You guys were doing like Pomodoros or something at a cafe. It wasn't just her, but like there was a group of you during the pandemic who were kind of supporting one another, getting books done, correct?
Yes. It was Jade Chang, Jean Chin Ho, Asia Gable, who has a book coming out on November 4th called Lightbreakers, and Shwen Juliana Wang, who's written one collection called Home Remedies. And it was multiple cafes and hotel lobbies and restaurants where they seemed to not kick us out if we opened our laptops. And we really didn't talk about our actual projects that much. We just talked about our desire to finish the projects. But I think that was very nice because it was, we would write, and then on our breaks, we would talk about all sorts of things, and then we would write more. But there wasn't an expectation that we were going to someday like show our work to each other or something like that.
It was just like some sort of accountability structure.
Yeah.
And it was during the pandemic. So there was kind of just like mutual support, just good to see people and to maybe be out. Like, I'm curious, were you indoors in a cafe? Like, at what stage of the pandemic was this?
Started in like 2021 through like really when I left LA in 2024, probably halfway through, like once people got vaccinated in 2021, so probably like the fall. But that's a nice thing about being in LA is that there's a lot of opportunities to sit outside. And often many of these places, nobody is sitting, nobody is outside because people are sort of spoiled for choice. So it was just various coffee shops like in mostly Los Feliz and Silver Lake.
So yeah, I feel like when I think about this past decade and I think about all that has happened politically, the pandemic, economically, I know that history is kind of rife with craziness and terrible eras. I think we are objectively living through something very intense. I'm wondering if you see it the same way. I mean, I'm just thinking of the friends in your book and the stresses of this time and how they work on people. And I wonder frequently when I look around, like if I'm seeing things clearly. It might take me a long time to be able to look back on this time with clarity. And I guess I'm wondering if like your book was an attempt to zero in on it. Do you have thoughts along these lines? Have you observed similar ways in which people have responded to all that's been happening in maybe good and bad ways? Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I mean, broadly, it feels like there's a fundamental just shift and like mutual understanding of what like society is for and how it works. And I think that there's people, I think on a micro level, people in your life who it might seem like are making bizarre choices in response to that feeling of a shift. I think that's obviously how we've ended up where we've ended up politically, because people are desperate for some feeling of going back to how things were before. And so they've decided that they're willing to sacrifice a lot of things and even other people to have that feeling. I think that it is when people believe that everyone who agrees with the like phrase "Make America Great Again" is just about racism, they just have a very sort of impoverished imagination, because it's, I think, a lot more than that. It's about a feeling of safety. Obviously, it's always been safety for who, but it doesn't feel good to go through times that people are unprecedented, but also people are telling you constantly are unprecedented. And what I tried to do in this book was to think about, given especially the feeling that anything might happen, and that I think, especially the pandemic, a lot of people in this country expected one kind of concerted government response, and that never came. And that has shaken something, I think, something very fundamental about just basic social contract stuff. One thing that really inspired me about living in LA is saying that there are other options besides becoming more isolated and becoming more depressed and becoming more sort of self-interested and individualistic.
Wait, what?
LA has a very beautiful mutual aid tradition. And I think people saw it this summer with the response to the ice raids, and people saw it before that in the winter after the fires. But one thing that this book I hope, is a meditation on is also, what is it going to take for people to understand that community is bigger than just your friends? Community is bigger than just the people who look like you or who worship like you, but that there has to be a more expansive view, or we're all in trouble.
Yes, that's well said. And, you talk about Los Angeles, you mentioned New York. Another thing that this novel does so beautifully is it draws place extremely well. And I think I was reading in my research that you love like city planning. Is that right?
I do. I think that if there are two through lines from the Turner House to this book, one is obviously just like I seem to like a lot of voices, like a multi POV situation. But then also that book is a book deeply interested in place and like both macro and micro choices on the level of how people interact with the space of Detroit as a city. And this book is also interested in place on that same like big and small levels of how choices that have been made about how people move around the city, where people can rest in the city, etc. I'm deeply interested in those.
Yeah. And, Turner House, you're exploring Detroit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this book, it's LA and New York. And I know that you come, like your parents, I think your mother's Los Angeles and your father is from Detroit. So this is kind of a way for you to explore like family roots too, like where you come from. And I don't know how much time you spent on the ground in Detroit growing up, but was that a way for you to sort of get to know it?
Yeah. I had gone to Detroit a lot, just, vacation, et cetera, growing up, but I had never lived there. And I, at the time, felt like when I was writing The Turner House, that distance was useful, like to research and to organize, and not to feel like there was too much information. There was too much just sort of intimacy that I could put too much in the novel. But when I started working on The Wilderness, I was living in New York. And then I moved to LA for 4.5 years. And that's where I finished the book. And then I moved back to New York again, because it turns out I prefer to live in New York. But this book, I think, is thinking about the LA that I grew up in and what it has become, and also the New York that I have come of into middle age. New York is a place I've lived most as an adult. And so thinking about both of those things and thinking about particularly what Black communities look like in both of those cities over the past 20 years.
Yeah, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about what LA was like when you were growing up versus what it's like now, and also why you now prefer to live in New York.
Well, I don't like to drive, so that's easy. But I also, there are things that were like embedded in just my understanding of LA when I was growing up, that it wasn't until I got older I was like, this is a strange a strange aspiration. Like for one, LA, it's a city where everyone is supposed to aspire to not just own a home, but to have a detached family home. Like, and it's not sustainable for the amount of people who live in LA, but everybody still just wants to have their little kingdom. And part of the reason why this is something that like is so ingrained in you, the reason why when I was like in elementary school before my mother bought a home, where I was so self-conscious about living in an apartment, was because there's not enough public space, right? There's just everyone, if you have it, then you can build it in your backyard. You can build the community you want, but it's not organic to the city. Like there are not enough public, like third spaces that don't require, some fee of entry. There are not enough parks, especially not enough parks with actual shade appropriate for a city like Los Angeles. There are not enough places for sort of spontaneous meeting. Or really, you could plan a day in LA where you don't ever speak to anyone you don't want to speak to. And you go outside your house. Whereas in New York, you better stay in your house. If you don't want to speak to someone you don't want to speak to. So I thought about just how my understandings of what makes a person successful were not just very American, but also very Californian. And I think also just very Southern Californian, because there's plenty of successful New Yorker who has gonna share walls till the day they die. You can be a millionaire in New York and you're still maybe going to share some walls. And that doesn't mean that you haven't made it as a person,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's interesting to hear you say all of that, because as somebody, I grew up in Milwaukee. I'm from the Midwest originally, but I've spent my adult life in Los Angeles, which I didn't really expect to happen, but somehow it's happened. And I feel like living here makes like a little city planner out of all of us. It's a frustrating place to live on that level where you're like, this could be such a great place if it just had, I've said this on this show so many times that there are people right now like throwing their phones against the wall. But it's like, it's impossible to live here and not feel like that, because it's such a beautiful place. But like you say, not enough third spaces, not enough tree cover and shade and parks. There should be a green belt running through this city. This is my fantasy anyway. It could have been done so much better. But the real estate barons sort of won out. It seems like they built out every inch of this city, and it's really hard to kind of retrofit it with the sorts of things that you're talking about.
I used to live in Atlanta for just 1 year before I went to Iowa for grad school. And back then, this was 2008, 2009, they were talking about this thing they wanted to build in Atlanta called the Beltline. And it was going to take this like not used stretch of, I guess city-owned, probably mostly city-owned. Maybe they did eminent domain, some of it, land, and make, basically something like the High Line in New York, but in Atlanta, like you walk from community to community on this belt line. And at the time I was like, they're never going to do that. This city has like a little, they have a little train system, but they love cars. It's not going to happen. And I was on the belt line last weekend and it happened. And it probably, has helped to spur gentrification, et cetera. But that is that's not the fault of the green space. That is the fault of, again, more city planning and legislation. But I really could not see it. Obviously, Atlanta is a much greener, like tree cover city than LA in many parts of it. But it was something that I could not see 17 years ago. And then to be on it, I was like, wow, here it is.
So wait, are you telling me that there's hope?
Yes, there's always hope. It's funny because in 2016, when I had this fellowship at the library, I had researched all of these proposals that people had about what the city should look like by the time the Olympics came. And there were proposals that there would be what freeway was this? I think it was the 101, no, the 110, that the stretch to Pasadena would be, because the train line, there's a train that will take you to Pasadena, that would be turned into like a green belt so that you could walk through the middle of downtown. People had these beautiful proposals and they did not happen. But it's, at some point, the people in LA have to stop thinking with their homeowner brain and think about their I need to survive brain. I need to survive in this place. But instead they just think about like their property value and they vote accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen those. I think I've seen some of those renderings, like these beautiful digital renderings of like the 10. It's like covered. And so there's a green belt on top of the freeway, because that would probably be the only like contiguous stretch of real estate that you could do it on. But it's like, oh, that would be great. You know, if the 10 were just like a tunnel, and then you could like ride a bike on a bike path from downtown to the beach, you know, or whatever, without having to fight a million red lights and traffic and all the rest. But we'll see. We'll see. Fingers crossed.
Who knows?
Who knows? But now you're in New York, and I want to talk a bit more about just that kind of the trick that you pull in this book of managing all of these different lives and the different ways that they intersect. And I want to tie it to your bio, because I think I read that you grew up in a large family. And I'd just love to hear you talk about maybe the ways in which that experience has informed your creative ability to manage these large casts. Like, do you think there's a connection between the fact that you grew up in a large family, we're kind of navigating a lot of different relationships, to the ways in which you sort of manifested these kinds of relationship dynamics creatively?
I think so. I think that I am not, it doesn't seem difficult to me to think about, when I think about a character, I think about them as part of a network. I think about the other people around them. And when I think about narrative, I think about how did multiple people experience this thing, that there is no like one narrative of what happened. There's obviously a way that this book could have been written from one, like a central POV, from one POV and about this friend group. But to me, that is not the same as writing a book about a friend group. That's writing a book about a person in a friend group. And so when I think about how to build a character, it is about who they are connected to. That is not like a secondary concern. It's a primary concern. And I think that probably has to do with always being around a lot of people. I had friends over yesterday, and it was last minute, so I told people they could bring their kids. And one of my friends was like, it feels like the 90s in here. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was just like, you know, we're all hanging out, adults hanging out. The kids are like running in and out, you know, and they're like underfoot, and nobody is trying to keep everyone separate from each other. And it seems like now people, like adults, don't want kids to be in their space, you know, and if they are in the space, then everyone has to just be, you know, pretending that they love Bluey, and we cannot like have our own moment. Everything has to be geared around them. And that's not how I grew up. And it's not, I feel like we can't, especially as like a parent, we can't just, if you never are allowed to have a moment, if your kids are around, you're never allowed to have a moment to yourself at the same time, then that's how you end up being burned out, because then you're always just paying for those moments, right? And so that's how I similarly feel about when I build characters. Is I don't feel like it is overwhelming to have characters who also like have these relationships with other characters, and there's just like a big sort of thread of connections or net web of connections.
So I want to talk with you about the cover of your book.
Mm-hmm.
It's a striking cover. I have to imagine you like it.
I love the cover. I profiled Mickalene Thomas for a magazine in 2021.
And can you just say like a little bit about who Mickalene Thomas is?
Oh, sorry. I just assume everybody knows. But Mickalene Thomas is a really internationally renowned visual artist. She would call herself a painter, but she is known for her collage elements that she puts into her paintings, and also her photography. And mostly very known for her portraiture. So especially of like Black women in repose. And has these sort of signature living rooms that in her installations, she had a show that was at the Broad in downtown LA called All About Love. And then it went to Philadelphia, and then it went to the South Bank Center in London. She makes these installations that are living rooms that she puts her paintings in her museum shows or in her gallery shows. And I remember when I was researching for this profile, I tried to look at everything she had ever made. And in the 2010s, she did these interiors and also these landscapes. And they weren't portraiture. They had no people in them, or at least no obvious to discern people. And I was really interested in them because they were obviously, like, it was clear they were made by her, but there was to me as a writer, it felt like they had more narrative space to imagine what is happening in these spaces, like what is happening in these rooms, because there's no person, to help you fill in the blanks. So when we were trying to find the right cover, I just called her and asked if I could use what is the art that is on the cover.
And why that photo? Is there something about it that really spoke to you?
Well, thinking about this being a friend group and thinking about the room itself, the piece that's on the cover is called Interior, with two zebra chairs and funky fur, and it is a room that aesthetically only a few kinds of people, I think the average viewer in 2025 would assume either this is a place where Black women live or maybe a certain kind of gay man, and that's it. And I liked playing with that, the idea of like who adorns a space like this, but also the room is inviting. It feels like there are chairs for people to actually sit on who might be inhabiting a room like that. I think a cover should ask questions, and it seemed like it had questions to offer.
Yeah, like space for imagination. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. And also it just made me think of like this aspirational thing of young adulthood and middle age about real estate. And I don't know if do you follow Architectural Digest on Instagram? It tortures me.
I do. Yeah. I mean, what really tortures me when I see rich people who just refuse to put any colors in their house, like at all. Like the richer they are, not every kind, but there's a certain genre and it's just so beige. And it really is sad because it's like, this is expensive beige. But yeah, that's another thing, is thinking about the cover and thinking about the room as a room. Somebody is really, if they're renting, they're not getting their deposit back, right? They've really done a lot to customize the space in this way that I like. I like that it feels like somebody who's not afraid of, maybe I'm not getting the deposit back, but while I'm here, like I'm going to have a good time in this space.
I think it's a good thing. I wish I did more of this, but I mean, some of it has to do with just resources and time, but to really make a space your own and Absolutely. To really invest, especially if you're going to spend a lot of time at home, which most of us do. It's nice to make it yours and to really put some thought into how you want to decorate it and what kind of colors you want to have around you on a daily basis. Like, I wish I could do more of that.
I think we all do. Well,
yeah. Well, except, the people on Architectural Digest, whatever.
Yeah.
They've got it. They seem to have it sorted out. I'm like, who allows themselves? It's like an advertisement for, there's something similar about all of them. Do you know what I'm saying? They all sort of blend together in my head. It's just rich people in these fabulous homes. A lot of them seem to be in LA or upstate New York. And it's just like, okay.
Yeah, there is a genre, and I feel like, I don't know which one came first, but there are certain hotels I walk into and I'm like, oh, this is one of those, like, it feels like this is the closest I'm going to get to sleeping in one of these people's homes. It's like, there's certain hotels that are also like espousing the same design ethos. And I don't know if it's like rich people travel a lot and they're like, I want my house to feel like this. Or the hotel is like, I want this hotel to feel like a rich person's house. I don't know which one came first.
That's really interesting to hear you say that, because again, this is I can never attribute these things, but I read something and it was somebody talking about oh no, you know who it was? Oh God, she does a podcast. Kara Swisher. Okay. Do you know who I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. You know who she is? She's a journalist and she does this podcast, and she's covered the tech industry for years and years. That was sort of her beat, or still is, I guess, as a journalist. So she knows Mark Zuckerberg. She knows Jeff Bezos. She knows Elon Musk. She's been in rooms with all these guys. And she's like, and I've been in a lot of their homes. And she's like, when you're in the homes of billionaires, it's like you're at the Four Seasons. Yeah. It's the same aesthetic. It smells the same way. Like that that vaguely like eucalyptus-y. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like they just want it to be like a luxury hotel, but there's also something really soulless about that at a certain point.
Yeah, because when you're at the luxury hotel, you eventually are like, all right, I want to go home.
yeah, this place is giving me the creeps. Everyone's
Right.
sort of eyeballing each other and trying to like,
Yeah.
it's like, get me out of here, you know? And yet, I don't know. I'm not surprised to hear that at all. That like, if you go to Jeff Bezos's house, it just feels like you're at like some Four Seasons hotel somewhere. That tracks.
Yeah. It makes me just want to become more of like a maximalist in my own home. Like this is the way that I will be anti-billionaire, is to just be a weirdo in my own space.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to shift gears a little bit and just ask you about like a bit more about like your creative backstory. Like I know that you went to the Iowa Writers Workshop. You mentioned that a bit ago,
Mm-hmm.
but like how long has this been going on for you? Like, are you somebody who came to books in college? I've heard that before. You know, writers will be like, I didn't read it all until I got to college. And then I had a professor who handed me a book and the light went on. There's also a lot of people who like were nerds from birth, you know. I'm just curious, like how it unfolded for you. Like how long have you known that you wanted to make books?
I've wanted to make books since I was 6 years old. I was an early reader because I have a sister who's almost 3 years older than me. So I kind of did everything when she did it. And I was given by one of my aunts a journal when I was 6. And I just was really interested in writing in it. And I wanted to be a writer since then. So I guess nerd from birth. I have been just a really voracious reader and reading with an interest in like how books work since I was very young.
Were there particular authors as a kid that spoke to you?
Oh, I mean, yeah. So there was like C.S. Lewis, like the Chronicles of Narnia. Kids love sets, you know. So there was that, and then in junior high school, I was really into Anne Rice, all the vampire novels, and I think in high school it was like the sort of beginning of my interest in Toni Morrison, and yeah.
Well, Toni Morrison, I think her work, I feel like there are allusions to it, like explicit allusions to it in The Wilderness.
Yeah, so one of the epigraphs is from a Toni Morrison novel, Sula, which is her novel of friendship between two women. And I think that a lot of the way that I approach memory is certainly aspirationally Morrisonian, whether it achieves it or not. That is the aspiration, that it's not like I just don't really have that much interest in linearity, and I have an interest in memories that kind of develop or kind of are circled around and develop over time. Like there's sort of the true meaning, it becomes clear over time.
So Iowa, like you went to USC for undergrad, is that right?
Yes.
And you were in the journalism school, but then you switched.
No, I was for like a second. And then I switched to English creative writing, but then I still got a communications like double major so that my mother wouldn't be too worried. And yeah, when I was at Iowa, I took workshops with T.C. Boyle and Marianne Wiggins, and I can't remember who else. Yeah.
What was your experience like at Iowa? I've talked to a lot of Iowa Writers Workshop graduates over the years, and it's always fascinating to me to hear like the different experiences of it. Was it happy for you?
I had a really good experience at Iowa. I think it helped that I was admitted I applied in 2008. And so I got there really when everybody understood there were no jobs because of the recession. So I didn't have this, I really was just interested in a school that I didn't have to pay for. The only reason I knew about Iowa is because after my last workshop in like office hours with TC Boyle, he had mentioned he had gone there and he said, oh, you shouldn't rush to get an MFA. You should just get jobs. But if you keep getting laid off or fired, and you want a break, then maybe you should get an MFA. And so then when I got laid off in 2008 from my first job post-college, I remembered that and was like, maybe now's the time. So I went to Iowa just thinking, oh, this is somewhere I could live cheaply and figure out how to write a book. And I was lucky. There was just friends that I still have that were there at the time. Justin Torres was there at the time. Ayanna Mathis was there at the time. Chinelo Caparanta. Just some friends. A friend of mine, Emma Borges Scott, who is a freelance editor and is also my first reader, always was there. So I just met the people I needed to meet, I think. And I worked with professors and writers that I had admired before Iowa. So I felt really lucky.
So the freelance editor, forgive me on the name again, it was
Emma Borges Scott.
Okay. And she's your first reader forever, just because close friend gets your work. I love hearing about relationships like that.
She's a really good editor. I think that she does it for free for me, but because I think that this is an epidemic, not just in editing, but in like criticism, etc. We live in a time of people thinking more about what they wish a work was than thinking about what the work is. And she is very good at doing the latter. Like, what is this actually? And communicating that back to a writer is really useful, like just on a basic level, because then it's like, is this what I intended or is this not what I intended? Like, this is what this is. And this is how it is working. But before talking about like how it's not working, which she absolutely does also, I just think she's like appropriately unsentimental, but still like kind.
That's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody who can kind of see it, maybe tell you what it is. Like, that's always nice. You're like, oh, I had no idea. Like, this is what I was up to. And I'm wondering, like, just as a creative matter, like how you work, like, are you somebody who does the big messy first draft and then makes sense of it in subsequent drafts? Or are you somebody who sort of plods through that first draft and it's pretty good by the time it's done? You know what I'm saying? Like, what does it look like? And is there a through line between your two books? Like, or has it been different from book to book?
I write the first drafts by hand. So necessarily, and every few chapters I type them up. So that already is like a level of revision. If when I reread the handwritten chapter, it's not good, I'm not typing it up. So by the time I get through a first draft, what usually has to happen is further addition of, scenes, chapters, etc., not a complete reworking, because I'm very sort of slow with that first draft. I wish I could just write like a shitty first draft, but part of the kinds of books that I write, it is not about what happens necessarily as much as what it means that these things happened, what it means for the characters. So I don't even understand what the point would be to write a really quick draft, because it's not about what happens. I know what happens in my head, and that's not the challenge.
And writing by hand, I'm curious about that choice.
That's just the internet. I just have to be away from the internet. And that way I can literally not even have my computer out or near me. I can go out to a coffee shop with just the notebook. And that makes it harder for me to procrastinate, honestly.
So I'm curious, with all of the success that you've had in these first two books, I want to say The Turner House was a finalist for the National Book Award. The Wilderness has been nominated or is a finalist of some sort for the National Book Award, and the Kirkus Prize. Congratulations.
I'm on the long list for the National Book Award, but I did not make it to the short list this time around. But
still a huge accomplishment, and like pretty remarkable for your first two books to be received this way. Like, I'm always curious if writers have like grand strategies. Like, do you have a vision? Are you somebody who sets out a plan for like how many books I want to publish in my life, or what kinds of books I want to do? Or are you just day to day?
There's usually some moment where I make a list of things I don't want to do in the next book based on how hard they are to do in this book, or how fed up I am with them. So when I was writing The Turner House, I said the next book would not be multi POV, and it would just be under 200 pages or right around 200 pages. And then I wrote this book that is 300 pages and is multi POV. But I I think a lot of writers have a sense of just, do they want to be like how many books? Like, are we on the Deborah Eisenberg, one amazing collection a decade path? Are we on the Joyce Carol Oates, like write till you drop path, or somewhere in that spectrum? And I think that it would seem I was on the one a decade path, but it was just a very, as you said, a weird decade. Like a lot of things happened in the past decade that made it take the time it took. But yeah, I think I have a sort of sense of the number of books I would like to write total.
What's the number? Will you share?
Can't say. But
can't say. So I always end by asking my guest what they are working on. And, usually people have multiple irons in the fire. But if you don't, that's okay too. But I'm curious to know if you've got something else cooking.
I have a memoir that is due in the spring that as soon as I get off book tour, will be working. I was working at it before book tour, but I will get back to working on it. And I'm excited about that.
Can you give any hints as to what the memoir is about?
Sure. It's a meditation on motherhood, both from the perspective of being a mother and losing my mother when I was pregnant. But it's also, there's some city planning in there.
Good. I can't wait.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, the experience of writing nonfiction, like writing memoir versus writing these two big novels to start your career, like what the differences have been, the challenges maybe of writing memoir versus writing fiction.
Well, I think the challenge is just particular to myself, which is I tend to like a kitchen sink novel. Like I really want to be able to look back and be like, this was just literally everything I cared about in this moment of time when I was working on the book. That's what I feel like my first novels in a lot of ways. They have a lot of different things that they are concerned with, because I was concerned with those things, and I don't see why not put them in the fiction. But with the memoir, I try to be a little bit more focused, partially because I just am not interested in writing about everything in my life.
There's some things you want to leave out, like just not touch. Yeah.
So I try to be a little bit more disciplined about having everything in the book.
Is it like a more emotionally uncomfortable to write a memoir and to sort of really like directly implicate? I'm imagining you're in it, right? I mean, it's your memories. Has that been like an extra challenge, or is it something that you're pretty comfortable with?
I think the way that I write fiction is pretty emotionally, it can be like emotionally implicating also. So if anything, the bigger challenge is, especially writing about a time that has passed, and the longer I take to write this thing, the more time has passed, being respectful and sort of honoring the way that I felt about certain situations then versus trying to revise them constantly to be like, well, with more time, this is actually how I feel, because that is not really the project of the book. The project of the book is to think about it closer to the moment. That doesn't mean every memoir that's a project, but this one, that is the project.
And you're going to finish it up this spring, you think, this coming spring?
I will endeavor to, yes.
All right. Well, I wish you luck with it. And I thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. Congratulations again on The Wilderness and all of the success that you have had early in your career.
Thank you so much.
All right, that was Angela Flournoy, author of a new novel called The Wilderness, available from Mariner Books. You can find out more about Angela and her work at her website, angelaflournoy.com, and you can follow her on Instagram. Once again, the book, the new one, a finalist for the National Book Award and the Kirkus Prize, is called The Wilderness. It is available now wherever books are sold. Go get your copy right now. Don't forget to subscribe to this show wherever you listen. You can also subscribe on YouTube, and you can follow me on Instagram and Blue Sky. You can subscribe to my weekly email newsletter over at bradlisti.substack.com. And if you are a regular listener of this show and you want to show your support, you can do that at patreon.com/otherpplpod. If you would like to join the Other People Book Club or get an Other People t-shirt or a sweatshirt now, as we're headed into the fall, you can do all of that at the show's official website, otherppl.com. If you want to check out Deep Dive, my new venture, and if you want to get how to write a novel or how to write autobiographical fiction, the two existing Deep Dive courses, you can do that at www.deepdive.audio. Finally, if you have 2 minutes and you want to help me out, please give this show a rating wherever you listen. Rate it, write a little review. You know how this works at Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Wherever you listen, a rating and a review helps this show find new listeners. All right, so coming up on Thursday, I should be back with Mira Gonzalez for a new episode of Brad and Mira for the Culture, this podcast's weekly pop culture assessment. Mira, as many of you will know, was out sick last week. I think she has recovered. But you never know. So we'll see. It's touch and go. We're just going to have to sit on pins and needles and wait for the verdict. But hopefully a new episode of Brad and Mira for the Culture will be available on Thursday. Stay tuned.